And now, you're tuned in to RBLR, the home of Tampa Bay's RBLR Sports.
What's up, everyone? What's up, RBLR Nation? Ooh, I got to get my phone there. Hope everyone's having a good night, day, weekend, week, whenever you're tuning in. We're here. We're ready to talk some Bucs football. A little bit of a historic episode today. It's a bit of a slow time in the off season. There's not much to talk about. I know y'all probably are tired of hearing us talk about Baker Mayfield and Kyle Trask and, everything else that is mind-numbingly Bucs related. So we're going to have a little bit of fun today. We're going to take a little bit of a historical approach and a historical perspective on this episode, but can't go any further without introducing my wonderful co-host, Mr. Musab Tariq. Say hello to everyone, Mr. Musab.
Hey, what's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Always happy to be here. As Carter mentioned, it's the off season, so we have a little bit something special, going on for y'all during this off season. And as he mentioned, with the historic episode. But that's really about it, though. Hopefully, we'll change it up a little bit, tonight, and hope y'all enjoy it.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely a good change of pace from the usual, stretching out the draft material and looking at the past drafts. Let's talk about some fun stuff, because the Bucs may not be the Steelers or the 49ers or any of these really historic NFL franchises, but they've had some successful runs. You got to take the good with the bad. They have 2 Super Bowls, which is 2 more than the Panthers and the Falcons have, and it's 1 more than the Saints have. The whole rest of the NFC South has 1. So, 2 Super Bowls ain't too bad. So we'll just get right into it. We'll stop beating around the bush. We are talking about the all-time Bucs team, kind of our definitive, just all-time Bucs team. It's we're not going to take a big look at the offensive line. That could take a very long time. So we're going to mostly focus on the skill position players and then the defense, D-line, linebacker, the secondary. Just try to take a more, specific approach to it because those are the positions that everyone remembers. But before we get into it, I kind of want to surprise Musab here. I didn't put this in the notes, but Musab, if you had to pick one Bucs player that's your favorite Bucs player all time, it doesn't have to be any specific era or anything like that. He doesn't even have to be any good. It could be, Josh Freeman or Mike Glennon for all I care. It's your personal favorite. So who's your favorite Bucs player of all time?
Wow, this is a really good question.
I know, kind of putting me on the spot here.
For me, For me, I'll probably say I'm going to go with Mike Evans. Throughout the years since he started with us, I feel like he's always balled out, and he's always stood out. I feel like for me, he was a little kind of underrated at first as well. I feel like I didn't really pay much attention to him, but looking back and looking now as to how he's been performing, he's an absolute stud. You know what I'm saying? So he's one of the few players that I've just really kind of followed recently. And I don't know, he's a baller, but what about you, Carter?
Absolutely. Mike Evans is a great answer. If Zach were here, he would have a field day with my answer. My answer is Cadillac Williams, the running back they drafted in the first round out of Auburn in the early 2000s. I had a Cadillac Williams jersey growing up. He was the best. He was awesome. I was really excited when they drafted him because his name's freaking, he was Cadillac, as a running back with the name Cadillac, like you can't get any better than that. And then of course he had a moderately successful career with the Bucs. I mean, he probably didn't live up to the first round billing that a lot of people expected, but he played fairly well, and he's definitely, I think he's top 5 in rushing in Bucs history. So he could do a lot worse for sure. So yeah, after that little surprise question that I had for Musab, I had to keep something in the pocket, just to surprise him a little bit. We'll get started. So we'll start with the most important position and probably the easiest position, to be quite honest. We're starting with the offense, and we'll start with quarterback. And Musab, I'll let you go first because we have the same answer more than likely. So hit me with it.
Yeah, it's Tom Brady.
Yeah,
it's Tom Brady indeed.
Exactly
who you're repping. Just because with the impact, I mean, he's the GOAT. You know what I'm saying? We were blessed to have him on our team. Honestly, it was a blessing in disguise, and especially the fact that we won the Super Bowl in our own city. He comes in out of nowhere like the superhero he is, and wins one for us. It's massive, just because as you and I both know, we've had a quarterback issue since we won the Super Bowl. You feel me? It's
Mhm.
just we've had a bunch of guys. Winston didn't work out, which maybe we thought would have, but yeah, minus him, I mean, it was never something solidified, and I don't think that any time in the past we had any high hopes. But once Brady came in, I feel like there was a lot of optimism going on, and he brought us a chip.
Absolutely. And I think that as much as you can focus on the field success, which of course is great, and his statistics and everything, I think the amount of, the aura that he brought to the team, and the fact that he was able to recruit a bunch of players to come to the team, that also really contributed to the Super Bowl. But also, if you look historically at the Bucs quarterback position, I mean, whew, it's not a who's who. It's not exactly a stellar list. Joe Montana is not on here. John Elway is not on here. Steve Young is technically on here, but he's not. He's not actually. He's a 49ers quarterback, obviously. So um, yeah, it's brutal looking back at the list. I mean, Jameis Winston's top 5 in passing yards. I think he might be number 2. But the only guy that you could maybe make an argument, maybe, is Brad Johnson. But even him, he only really had the Super Bowl season that was really successful. And other than that, he was more of a journeyman quarterback, just kind of coming in and playing more of a facilitator role, even in the Super Bowl year. But yeah, Brady's pretty obvious candidate, with Brad Johnson coming up number 2. So now we move on to the running back position. There, it's kind of, I mean, it's a bit better than the quarterback position. Don't get me wrong, but it's not great. Um, I don't know. My pick was James Wilder. He's the all-time rushing leader. He's got a couple all-team, or excuse me, second-team All-Pro selection. He's a Pro Bowler. I mean, it's tough to argue with the rushing numbers. He's got the most yards in Buccaneers history. So it's hard not to pick him. Obviously, there's some other really great names like Allstott and Warwick Dunn and Doug Martin. But that's probably my pick. How about you, Musab? Who's your pick for the running back position?
Yeah, when it comes to the stats and all of that and the way he performed, I'm going with Wilder as well. He was an absolute beast at his time. But I do have to say, uh, I want to make it a close second with Mike Allstott, just because I mean he was a train. You feel me? I mean, he
A
was
train.
running over
Yeah.
everyone like there was no tomorrow. You know what I'm saying? He was unstoppable. So, and also he came from the Super Bowl team as well. So that's why I do have a little bit more of a liking towards him. But I will say, other than those two, I don't think anyone else is close. I think it's a close race between first and second. I'm still going with Wilder, but yeah, that's really about it for me.
Yeah, I mean, there's some kind of honorable mentions. Warwick Dunn and Doug Martin certainly had their prime. Cadillac Williams is also up there, but Dunn and Martin definitely had some really good seasons in the Tampa Bay uniform. Martin, especially Martin, probably in his 1 year was probably the best running back in a single season of all time for the Bucs. He had an All-Pro selection, which none of these other guys can really say, other than the second team All-Pro of James Wilder. But yeah, the muscle hamster, right? Is that what they called Martin back in the day? He was a beast. I remember him coming out and firing. I mean, he just looked like a man possessed running the football. So he was definitely fun to watch. He was definitely someone I considered as well. But yeah, Wilder was kind of the easy choice. So now we're moving on to the wide receiver position. The wide receiver position, we're going to choose 2 guys, just because you can't really assemble a team with just one wide receiver. You got to have a couple of guys running routes. So we're going to have a little bit of fun with it, and pick 2. So Musab, who are your 2 wide receivers that you picked?
I'm going with Mike Evans and Vincent Jackson, just because Uh, if I had to choose, the way I was kind of thinking about these two was, if I had to, pick my favorite 2 wide receivers, it would be them 2, along with Brady, along with Wilder or Allstott, you know what I'm saying? That team would be unstoppable on the offense. So both of them phenomenal. Mike Evans is still balling out for us. And yeah, what about you? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, Vincent Jackson's a tough guy to exclude because he had a very good, very productive time in a Bucs uniform coming over from the San Diego Chargers. But I went with Evans and Mark Carrier. Carrier's he's third all time receiving yards and seventh in receiving TDs. He had a really productive career here. He really was, he was there through the lean years, and he was putting up numbers. But definitely, if I had to pick a third, just because sometimes teams run three wide receiver sets, I might have gone Keyshawn Johnson because he was a really key member of that 2002 Super Bowl team. But also Chris Godwin, he's certainly up there, and you could include Vincent Jackson as kind of the third wide receiver. But yeah, Joey Galloway too is a fun guy to talk about in regards to Buccaneer history. But yeah, definitely Evans, Jackson, Carrier, either any of those three guys could have been solid picks for this wide receiver group. But yeah, the Bucs have
It
had
gets
some.
tough. It
Yeah,
gets
it's
tough, to choose like a top two or whatever. You know what I'm saying? Just because as the guys you mentioned already, Carter, it's all kind of fair game. When you look at like that, because I mean, all these guys have balled out for the Buccaneers.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, if you were to pick any of those guys and put them on the Bucs roster right now, you'd be happy as a clam. You'd be you'd be thrilled because then you could have Evans, Godwin, and Keyshawn Johnson. I mean, good gracious, that would be ridiculous. So yeah, that's kind of my pick. And now we're going to move on to the tight end position. So this one's a bit interesting because they haven't really had some. It's kind of similar to the quarterback position. There haven't really been a lot of super productive tight ends. I know everyone probably thinks Gronk immediately, but Cam Brate, surprisingly, when him and Jameis had a very good connection, he racked up quite a few touchdown receptions as a tight end in his career. But my pick was actually Jimmy Giles. It was he's second overall in receiving touchdowns and sixth in receiving yards overall amongst wide receivers and tight ends. Obviously, first in those two categories amongst tight ends. But Gronk is obviously he was kind of short lived. He only spent a few seasons here, but obviously he contributed greatly to that Super Bowl run. He had an amazing Super Bowl performance. Without Gronk, the Bucs certainly don't win that Super Bowl in 2020. So Musab, I'd love to hear your take. Who's your tight end for this Bucs all-time team?
I had to go with the kind of the audience favorite, which is probably Gronkowski, just because for me it's just the impact he had with such a short time that he had with us.
For sure.
I was going with your guy as well, Carter, but I was just thinking, just imagine if Gronkowski was with us for a couple more years, and we've seen him in his prime, when he played with the Pats as well. So this guy was a beast, and it just makes me think, if we had him for a couple more years, I mean, it would be game over. And what he did for us, especially during that Super Bowl run, was big, super helpful, especially with the chemistry that him and Brady had. I think that's what made it so special. But for me, I'm gonna have to go Gronk just because it is hard to pick a tight end just because no one's ever really stood out. I'll probably talk about Brayton Giles, but that's really about it though. Yeah, I'm going with Gronk.
Yeah, like I said, Gronk is certainly a really worthy choice in this scenario for this position. It's really hard to kind of narrow it down between those two guys, Giles and Gronk. So, I certainly understand, definitely get the chemistry that like you said, the chemistry that Brady and Gronk had was remarkable. It was really interesting to see those guys go to work. Especially because, like we've been talking about, the tight end position hadn't really been a focal point throughout Buccaneer history. Well, neither had the quarterback position really, but especially the quarterback to tight end connection. And yeah, Gronk is an all-time tight end. You could put him on the short list of the best tight ends in the history of the NFL. So when you're talking about the best tight ends in a certain franchise's history, you kind of feel like you got to include them, right? It's hard not to. So yeah, I mean, Gronk, definitely a worthy candidate at the tight end position for sure. So I guess we're kind of focusing mostly on the all-time team aspect of it. But is there any player that you think of in Bucs history, specifically on the offensive side of the ball, that you think, oh man, I hated that guy? Like I just really disliked watching him suit up. I know this is kind of another surprise question, but other than maybe Kyle Trask, Is there anyone that you really just disliked watching suit up for the Bucs? Because I have my own answer, but I'd love to hear yours, because there have been a lot of pretty crappy football players that have come through the Bucs hallways, unfortunately. So I'd love to hear your least favorite offensive player.
Wow, this is an interesting question. I've never really had any strong disliking towards anyone.
Fair
But
enough.
well,
Fair enough.
what I will have to say is before Winston's time, I would say I'm disappointed with every single quarterback after Brad Johnson and before Winston. You know, it's a shame that none of them could really pick it up. I'll probably say Josh Freeman. I'll probably say is the first guy I was kind of like excited about at one point,
Mhm.
and it just didn't work out at all. So I don't want to just pinpoint it at him, but um, the reason why we've been unable to succeed in the past is not just because of quarterback room, but along with other positions. But then again, I mean, we've never had anyone who could really lead this team. Clearly, there were just all these guys who would just come in and out. You know what I'm saying? You know, a little one and done, or maybe 2 years or something. So, um, yeah, mine is for all those guys after Brad Johnson and before Winston. And even with Winston, I mean, nothing really special, uh, happened.
Well, the 30 for 30
So
season.
yeah, but I hate to say this, and I was hoping maybe you didn't set me up like this, Carter. But the way Winston performed reminds me of like a kid with a 4.0 GPA, but like 31 DUIs. You feel me?
Oh, yikes.
And when I say DUIs, I mean like interceptions. I mean, this guy could throw, but I mean, then again, he could also
Well,
throw to the opponent. So
right.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely the miraculous kind of all or nothing kind of approach. I mean, I remember that play against the Bears, I think it was. He was just running around the pocket, just kind of evading guys, and then eventually just throws one up to Mike Evans, and it somehow lands in Evans's hands. And it was just that was kind of the epitome of the Jameis Winston era. Just a lot of weird stuff going on, and you didn't really know what to expect. And sometimes he would just pull something out of a hat and just be like, "Oh, hey, I did this." So, yeah, Winston's definitely probably up there for me as far as least favorite Bucs players. But if I had to pick one, it'd probably be Mike Glennon, just because, and he was brutal to watch. I mean, he was tough, because it was in that era where it was like, I think Glennon and then Josh McCown, I think, came in and played. And you can't really
that's what
hate on
I'm
Josh.
saying, Carter. Man, it was ugly, man.
Yeah. I mean, we're talking about Josh McCown being a starting quarterback. That's disgusting. Yeah, Chris Sims as well. I mean, it was a brutal, brutal time. But McCown, you can't really hate on because he was a career backup. So, like, what do you expect? But Glennon was drafted in the third round. He was kind of heralded as like, oh, well, maybe he could be a franchise quarterback. No, not even close. I mean, good gracious. Watching him go out there and play was just, oh, it kind of made your stomach hurt. Um, so yeah, definitely, definitely Mike Glennon for me.
Makes me queasy to think that he was our starting quarterback at one point.
He was not only the starting quarterback; he had a captain's badge. He was an offensive captain for a
Oh
year.
wow,
Yeah,
wow,
so I mean,
forgot about
it's
that. Yeah,
right, right. Yeah, you want to forget about it, because I certainly don't want to remember it. It was a
yeah.
brutal
You
time.
started to
It
give me
was
PTSD.
right, right. Oh man, yeah. I mean, Glennon was brutal. I think he was out of NC State, and I don't know how he lasted in the league so long. Plus, he got a $9 million contract from the Bears for a season, or $8 or $9 million contract. I don't know how that happens. I don't know how the guys that are just so bad just stick around. Like Nathan Peterman was one of them. I think he threw like 4 or 5
Oh
interceptions in
yeah,
a game, and he managed to get a backup job with the Raiders the next season. It's ridiculous. Anyways, we're getting into a rabbit hole. But one thing that won't throw 4 or 5 interceptions, one thing that is definitely, 50 touchdown season, if you're making comparisons like that, which is kind of a stretch, but that's kind of my thing, is the RBLR shop. They've got some fire gear. I got to shift in the camera here a little bit, but you can go to shop.rblrsports.com. Definitely check out some swag there. We've got some great stuff, to bring back the devil. If you're looking for Tampa Bay stuff, because Tampa Bay's been, as much as we're talking crap about the Bucs for the past few minutes, they've been successful in Tampa for the past few years. So things are looking on the up and up. The Rays won today. So if you're looking for some Rays gear, Rowdies are looking hot. Obviously, the Lightning are always good, but 10% off everything in the store. We'll give you a promo code Cannons, CANNONS. Definitely type that bad boy in there, and you'll get 10% off your order. If you're looking to support the podcast or just support our show, we'd really appreciate it. That's our shameless shop plug for the day. And now we are moving on to defense. So the all-time defense, this is where things get actually pretty fun, because the Bucs, for all of their struggles offensively, for as bad as they've been on offense, they've been really, really good on defense. They've had some, as Musab would like to say, they've had some guys that have been balling out. We're definitely going to get a little deeper into this one, because I think we're going to have some healthy discussion about it, because I think we all have some different, or we both have some different players that we're going to mention. We're going to start with the defensive line. We're going to pick 3 guys, and we'll just get right into it. My 3 guys are Leroy Selman, Simeon Rice, as well as Gerald McCoy. That last one might get some eye rolls. I know Gerald McCoy is a bit of a polarizing figure in regards to Bucs history, but can't deny he had 3 All-Pro selections, 6 Pro Bowls, and he was just kind of a lone bright spot on a lot of really bad Bucs teams in those late 2000s, early 2010s. And Leroy, I mean, what's more is there to say? The Selman Expressway, first in sacks. He's a Hall of Famer. And then Simeon Rice, he's 3rd in sacks. And he was a big part of that 0-2 Super Bowl team. So those are my 3 picks. Musab, how about you? Who's your defensive line picks for the all-time team?
I mean, I'm going Warren Sapp, Simeon Rice, and Gerald McCoy. With Sapp and Rice, I mean, just absolute studs in the past for our Buccaneers. And, I'm right there with you when it comes to Gerald McCoy. I know, maybe some people might roll their eyes or whatever, but, he was a stud when he was on our team. You know what I'm saying? So, he had his time with us, which, I wish, we could see something like that happen again. I mean, there's still a lot of guys I'll probably put up there that could be just as great as them in the future. I'll probably say Vita Vea or Shaq Barrett, but as of right now, what we're looking at all the time, I'm sticking with those 3.
Those are solid choices. I mean, it's tough to leave Warren Sapp off that list. I don't know. Warren Sapp's just a tough guy, because he's got his off the field stuff. And I know that shouldn't affect my judgment of him on the field, but I don't know. It's tough for me to include him. Same with Jameis. That's always clouds my judgment when it comes to these types of things. But he was an incredible defensive lineman in his time for sure. But yeah, I mean, Gerald McCoy, like you said, he was definitely a stud. I think he was a 2nd or 3rd overall pick. It was him and Dominican Sugg came in at the same time in that same draft class, near the top of the list. And yeah, like you said, the 2 guys that you mentioned, Vita Vea and Shaq Barrett, could easily slide into this list. Shaq, it's tough because this might be his last year in a Bucs uniform. He's coming off a pretty serious injury. He wasn't super productive last year, but man, his first 2 years here, he was one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. I mean, he was putting in work. So it's really tough to exclude him off this list because he had such a high prime. But yeah, Vita Vea, he's been here for a few years, and he's been really, really good every year he's been here. He's a captain now, rightfully so. He's definitely a leader in that locker room. And yeah, I mean, those are 3 really, really solid choices. You can't really argue with any of them. So now we're moving on to the linebacker position. This one's also super fun. We're only going to pick 1 this time, only 1 linebacker. Although, you can definitely get away with picking 2 if you want to, but for now we'll just pick 1. Mine is Derrick Brooks. I mean, it's kind of money in the bank. I mean, Derrick Brooks he was a defensive player of the year, Super Bowl winner. I mean, 11 Pro Bowls and 9 All Pros is just ridiculous. First in tackles, Hall of Famer. Also incredibly active in the community. I mean, you think about Tampa and, Tampa football, you think about Derrick Brooks, Leroy Selman. Those are kind of the first 2 names that come to mind, and they've stuck around. They really hang in the community. They really hung in the community, and they are really, really important figures in the city of Tampa Bay, regardless of Bucs history. So yeah, Brooks is my pick, but Levante David and Barrett Ruud are definitely 2 interesting guys. David comes in 3rd in tackles. That's kind of the big statistic when it comes to linebackers. But how about you, Musab? Who's your pick for the linebacker position?
I'm going to have to go with Derrick Brooks as well, just because, I mean, as you mentioned already, this guy's stats just don't lie. He was phenomenal. Okay. I would probably say, yeah, if anything, David is that second pick for me. But as of right now, I mean, when it comes to the linebacker room, I don't think anyone has performed like Derek Brooks has. I mean, his resume really stands out compared to others. So that's why, yeah, I'm going Derek Brooks as well.
Yeah, I mean he's one of the best linebackers ever. Period. It's hard to include a list of coverage linebackers that doesn't include him. He was that dude. He was ridiculous during his time with the Tampa Bay Bucs. And like I said, he started Brooks to Bartlow, the school. So he's really stuck around in the community as well. He gives talks all the time. I remember coming up in high school. Derek Brooks was giving a talk about just staying in school and not being basically just not being an idiot. Just get your priorities straight and just make sure that you're on the right path. And he just seems like a solid guy. So yeah, Derek Brooks, really really good pick. Hard to argue with him for the linebacker position. But now we're moving on to the secondary. We're kind of wrapping up our defensive position wise discussion. We'll also get into a little bit of other stuff defensively to wrap up the episode. But the secondary is really interesting as well. Obviously, I think we're both going to be unanimous in our picks because there are two guys that really stand out in regards to Bucs history. No, not Darrelle Revis, even though he had a little weird season in Tampa. But no, it's definitely got to be for me, Rondé Barber and John Lynch. Barber's just, I mean, he's first in picks, second in tackles. He's part of that 2002 Super Bowl team. Just, like I said, a really big figure in Buccaneer history. It's hard to really talk about the Bucs without talking about Rondé Barber. And then John Lynch, he's kind of similar. He was sixth in picks, fifth in tackles. He was also part of that Super Bowl team. Unfortunately, now he's the GM for the 49ers and he's tearing it up there. So unfortunately for the Bucs, he's kind of killing it off the field with his front office work. But when he was a Bucs player, he was remarkable, really key contributor to that 2002 Super Bowl team. Musab, how about you? Who are your selections for the secondary for the all-time Bucs team?
For me, I mean, the secondary, there's only been a few kind of special people, and I mean, my top two would obviously be, John Lynch and Rondé Barber. Both of them absolutely just beasts on the field. Super vital players, when it comes to our past, seasons, especially with the Super Bowl championship. For me, John Lynch was just a guy who just came in clutch more than ever. And then, Rondé Barber was just, he was an OG Buck. You know what I'm saying? He stayed with us since the start. And, again, he's just one of those kind of special kind of players that people are always going to remember.
Absolutely. I mean, I remember growing up, they had the reading with the Bucs bookmarks or something, and they would give them out at school. And Rondé Barber was always on the bookmark as the Bucs player there. So, yeah, I mean, Rondé Barber is definitely like you said, a key figure in Bucs history. He's an OG, and now I think he's an analyst and working in the media. So good for him. Just keep making that money. Doing his thing. His brother Tiki, he was a running back for the Giants. He was kind of interesting as well. A guy that kind of narrowly missed my list was definitely Donnie Abraham, just because he was second in picks. I mean, he was a really, really productive player during his time, kind of during the lean years, because, there were a lot of them. If we're not talking about Super Bowl player teams, then we're likely talking about guys that were on some pretty awful Bucs teams, unfortunately. So, Donnie Abraham's definitely one of those guys. So now we'll move on to our least favorite defensive player. We did it for the offensive side of the ball. Is there any guy that you think about in Bucs history? I know for us, we're both a bit on the younger side, so we might have a bit of a recency bias, I guess you could call it. But Musab, I'll let you go first. Who's your kind of least favorite defensive player for whatever reason in Bucs history?
Well, this one's even harder than the offense.
Yeah, right. It is kind of hard, isn't it? Yeah.
Oh, Lord. I'm gonna have to think about this one as I'll pass the mic back on to you, Carter. You probably already have someone on deck because I can talk about this one. I mean, no one's really aggravated me specifically But I don't know. Maybe if you drop a couple names like you
For
did, with
sure.
Mike Glennon and all that, maybe I'll come up with someone.
Right. I know Vernon Hargrave is probably going to uh, be on the top of a lot of people's lists because he was that first round pick. He went to my high school though, so I hate to trash on him, but he's probably a lot of people's least favorite Bucks defenders. Um, for a while there, for a few years there, man, Jamel Dean was tough to watch. I mean, in the first part of his career, he could be kind of tough to watch out there. It felt like he was getting burned almost every other position. I mean, there was that game against Kansas City. I think it was in the 2020 Super Bowl year where Tyreek Hill had like close to 200 receiving yards by halftime. And it felt like he was always just running by Jamel Dean. But now, of course, Jamel Dean had a wonderful season last year. He's bounced back, and he's an important contributor to this team. But it's kind of interesting to think about. But yeah, Vernon Hargraves is definitely tough. There was Noah Spence was an edge rusher for a little bit, and he was kind of a disappointment. Yeah, I mean, it's a bit harder with the defense for sure. Vernon Hargraves is probably my pick though, just because he was just there was a lot riding on him because he was a first round pick, top 15, and man, he did not pan out at all. So does that? You might agree with me. Maybe it's jogging your memory like, oh God, I hated watching Vernon Hargraves. Maybe he's your pick.
You know what? He is my pick for a different reason. So wait, Carter, you went to Wharton?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I went to Wharton.
Yeah, okay, yeah, because I remember I'll tell you this, man, it's gonna sound a little odd, but sometimes I used to read the newspaper in the morning when I was in high school.
No, I
And
did
when I
too.
was a freshman, Vernon Hargreaves was a senior, and I'm pretty sure he was like Tampa Bay Times like player of the year.
Hmm.
That's how I found out about him. And then he went to UF, he balled out of UF or whatever. And then yeah, we got him in the first round. And you're right, to get a guy like that who was seen as a stud and then it doesn't work out for him, it sucks. So um, if there's anyone you mentioned right now, I'll probably just go along right with you with Vernon Hargreaves, just because uh, it was a valuable pick we made, but it didn't work out. It's a little strange just because he was kind of hyped up until he finally played with us. So yeah.
Yeah, I think Vernon's probably a lot of people's choices in this regard. Now we'll get to the end of the episode. We'll kind of finish it out with this is kind of a big question in Buck circles. There have been newspapers articles written about it. I know the Tampa Bay Times did a feature on who's better, because it really comes down to two coaches. Although maybe you disagree, you might bring up Bruce Arians, but who's the head coach of your all-time Bucks team? For me personally, it's got to be Tony Dungy. The amount of work he put into building that defense and that roster, and just the remarkable things that he did leading up to obviously the Bucks trading for John Gruden and eventually winning the Super Bowl. Like people say, oh, it was Dungy's team, but Gruden pushed him over the top. But I don't know. I don't know. I feel like if you gave Dungy another year, he might have done the same thing. That was a really talented 0-2 team. So for me, Dungy's my pick. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. Like I said, maybe you think Arians is, because shoot, I mean, Arians was a huge, huge reason, obviously, why we saw as soon as Arians retired, they dropped below 500 with Tom Brady as their quarterback. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on who the all-time head coach would be.
I mean, yeah, I'll probably I would say Arians just because of what I've seen recently, but I mean, it has to be Tony Dungy. You know, the impact that he had and all the years that he spent with the Buccaneers as well. It's really big for us. So it's something that a lot of us forget about, especially in our kind of age. We forget about the kind of OG Bucks, but it's I mean, it was a different organization back then, but I mean, they had some beasts, they had some amazing people, and that includes their head coach, yeah, Tony Dungy.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you want to talk about coaching trees. Tony Dungy was a huge one. Mike Tomlin got his start with Dungy, and there are a lot of guys who can kind of pinpoint their start and where they got their breakthrough moment was with Tony Dungy or on one of his coaching staffs. And the amount of work that he's done in the community is remarkable. So yeah, Tony Dungy is definitely a big pick for me. in regards to the head coaching position. But we've kind of reached the end of our all-time team episode. I hope y'all had fun listening. This was definitely a more relaxed, kind of just looking back at the years kind of thing. So thank y'all for listening. If you enjoyed what you heard, definitely hit that like and subscribe button wherever you're tuning in. You can also follow us on social media at RBLR Sports, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and we have a TikTok now. So definitely got to check that out. But thank you again for listening. We really appreciate it. Without y'all, we'd just be two guys talking about boring stuff with no one listening. So, so we really appreciate it. And we hope y'all are having a great night, great day whenever you're listening to us. And as always, go Bucs.
Go Bucs.
Thank you for tuning into this presentation by RBLR Sports. On your way out of the stadium, please remember to like and subscribe.